Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to KOTR. I know it's been a little while since I've last been on here. I've had a few other projects I've been working on. Good afternoon, Rob. But like I said, I've had other projects I've been working on and doing some work on my own spiritual path. Which is kind of important, which is also the importance of this podcast, and what this thing we're going to discuss tonight. I'm doing all right. I figured it's been long overdue that I get back to this channel and do some stuff. You know, sometimes you know me. I deal with complexity better than I do with simplicity. Sometimes I forget some of the simple, basic things like the importance of building a foundation. We talked about I've talked about a little bit of the destruction of the temple, which every neophyte beginner goes through. That actually the destruction of the old foundation, all the illusions, misconceptions, all the things we think we know that have been taught, which we come to find out has been one big lie for the most part. See, this kind of coincides with the destruction of the temple. First, we destroy our foundations. You know, because our foundation is filled with misconceptions, half truths, fabricated lies, illusions. You know, all the things that we've took in, that we've been told to take in. That is one of the processes and steps before we advance our spiritual path. It's also something that takes place every day of our life. As many people know, I usually drop off the face of the earth around October for about a month. For me, that's my time to reflect on things, reflect on the year, the goals, all the great works I've done in the spiritual path, all the stuff that I've taken in that, thus far set there or I've processed, but really haven't set there. Is this what I want to be a part of me? So I take that and reflect on all those things. Therefore, by doing so, I'm, removing the stuff that don't have a place in my foundation and allowing the stuff that does to stay. Our foundation is just not, for mine in particular, is not just consistent of the things I've been taught out of the OTO, Golden Dawn, IoT, Druidism. It's from every path that I've walked, every spiritual path that I've walked has a part in my foundation. My foundation, as far as my moral aspects and views, you'll see that it's consistent of more Druidic than the rest. But that's my base. That's what allows me to not, as I'm ever pushing those boundaries, never to completely just step over the cliff. Because I'm not in this disillusion that there's only one spiritual path. That's an illusion, guys. There's truths in all things. And that is also part of my foundation, realizing that there's truths in all things. realizing that I have to have a hat for every day, multiple hats for every day of the week, being able to switch from one aspect to another without thought, to where it's instantaneous because something just jumped me to that state, made me aware. But you can't; those things don't happen without a solid foundation. Those don't happen when you have misconceptions and illusions still in your foundation. Our foundations are so important that it seems to get overlooked by so many. And we live in a day and age now where, whether you want to believe it or not, it's a magical world. It's magic every day in front of our face. The very screen you're staring at to listen to me is a black mirror. We're surrounded by symbols and sigils, constantly bombarded by them. We don't, sometimes we forget that that's what they are. But, out of all the communities I work in and deal with, this community should know better. Just like I seen a currency note for the EU. And it never dawned on me till yesterday what I was looking at. I was looking at an Enochian letter, the Enochian alphabet, but they're using it to represent their currency. No one's ever questioned that. And for those of us that studied Enochian, we understand how powerful that alphabet is, just as powerful as working with the tablets. We see the seals embedded in the computer chips or on the computer boards. We live in a day and age where our foundation has to be solid, or we allow ourselves open for various forms of attack because we are constantly bombarded with so much, and we also have to realize that part of our foundation is what protects us. It's our shield against those things. And that sometimes it's so good, as you notice, I just pointed out something that I had missed that's been quite evident for years now. Because my foundation is so strong, when I see that symbol, that sigil, or that letter, it don't trigger. And therefore I overlook it. Or I just recognize it for what they say it is, and it has no meaning or power over me. Which is another point of having a strong foundation, because our foundations, if we have a strong foundation, nothing should have power or meaning to us. Nothing should be able to control us or influence us because they can't get through our very foundation. I'm constantly talking about on my other channel labels because it's words, it's symbols, sigils. They only have power if we give them power. But if we allow one of those labels or one of those words into our foundation, then we're allowing somebody to have access to our foundation to be able to manipulate us. And so many people have forgotten the lessons of the destruction of the temple, or whatever the words you choose to call the beginner's phase, the neophyte's phase. There's so many different words for it. Part of our foundation is also the energy we work with. But outside of that, it's just not the energy we work with. It's the energy that is around us. See, sometimes we get so caught up, we forget that we're a part of all things. Every energy and frequency that's out there is a part of us. It's made up into us. But yet I see so many people in our spiritual paths that get deceived in the beginning about ascension, descension, where they start drawing lines, putting importance on words, good, evil, black, white, when all that's a part of you. So if you believe in that and you believe you're something and you put emphasis on good over evil and not realize that both positive and negative flow through you and is a part of you, then you're starting to deny one, and therefore you're actually starting to close yourself off. You're actually causing more harm to your foundation and to your spiritual self. All those energies are meant to flow freely together. We sometimes forget that, you know, the cause and effect aspect, or the yin and the yang. We forget that it isn't good or bad, it's our actions. It's what's the word I'm looking for? I know it's been a while. It's what we perceive and justify it to be. There's a word for it, it'll come to me here in a second, that I'm looking for. Like I said, been a while, right, guys? But hopefully now you guys can actually hear me a lot better. The audio quality should be much improved from the last few videos I've done. Now that I've upgraded to a real headset and mic, our foundation is so important. We have to realize the things that we take in, we're also imprinting on our foundation. So if we don't take the time to focus on our foundation, remove the things that do not belong there, we're actually weakening our foundation. We're allowing ourselves to be influenced, manipulated, easily attacked. If I could find that chink in your armor, I have a foothold. I can gain access. The building of our foundation is knowing what fits, and at the same time knowing when we learn something else that it's time to remove that part that is no longer right, because we just weren't ready to perceive it at that time. We weren't ready to accept that. Those things have to be removed from our foundation, and it's a continuous thing. Every day in our journey in life we experience these things, and sometimes we don't realize that, oh, I'm just going to cleanse the aura. Well, cleansing the aura is cool, but that's not your foundation. It's a part of your foundation, but it isn't your foundation. Everything you take in becomes part of your foundation. So it's important to constantly clean and remove the things that's not longer a part of you, the things that were wrong, false illusions, things that you weren't ready to perceive at that time. It's like I talk about positive, negative energy. They're part of all of us. Can't deny it. But the problem is, so many people are misled and taught that you have to choose one side and you have to push back the other. When you do that, as I pointed out, you're blocking yourself. You're actually closing yourself off. People that know this know that it is part of them. It has to flow freely. It's the only way they can be in connection with their spirit, with their subconscious, with the universe, with God, goddess, whatever they choose to call their upon. That's where that connection has to be. I mean, we can use just the concept of God and the multi aspects of God. It's the easiest to be understood. God is loving and vengeful, or wrathful, loving, vengeful, but merciful. There's that double aspect. It is both. That both needs to be part of our foundation at its core to realize that, you know, when we do something, we've all heard the say, we've heard people say it, you probably said it yourself. No good deed goes unpunished, right? I mean, it's cause and effect. So many people get caught up in wanting good to be returned, when in fact that it might not be. Your good deed should never be looked upon for a reward. Those that look upon the reward usually get the opposite because they have misled themselves. We're meant to be taking in all the energies and just let it flow naturally. But when we start taking on concepts and take that mental stance that this is wrong, this is evil, then we start putting so much emphasis that it starts causing a confliction within self. And those conflictions open you up to other things, open you up to be easily manipulated, controlled, influenced. That's why having a strong foundation is so important. And that foundation can't be just an aspect of one thing. Because, therefore, we're going back to what we just talked about. We gotta be able to realize that there's many truths out there, many spiritual paths, and they all have truths, something that we need to learn, something that we can use to strengthen our foundations, to keep us away from harm and danger, to be able to break that control cycle, to break that influence. It allows us to become much centered and more one with everything around us. It gives us that stronger communication and communion with the deity that we worship, that we call upon, or the spirits that we interact with on a daily basis, or even the people that we interact with on a daily basis. It allows us to be able to read them better, communicate with them in a non-verbal way. We're always transmitting and transferring energy back and forth between each other. We just don't recognize or realize it because it happens on the spiritual plane, more of a spiritual nature. The transference of energy from one to another and the receiving of information from one another. We're all connected. We all have all these energies about us, but yet we decide to close it off, putting importance over one over the other and giving it a label. Therefore, we're causing a huge crack in our foundation. We're weakening our foundation. All energy needs to flow freely as one through us. Then we get into misconceptions. We take in from just one structure of our spiritual path, the structure that we're being taught out of right now, and we start closing ourselves off to other paths because we're taught that that's wrong, or we're taught that you have to choose ascension or descension, when in reality that's the hook. That's the trick. That's the one thing it's meant so they have control over you. So where they can dictate who you are, who you'll be. You know, labels are important in our spiritual paths. I agree there. But as with all things, they have their place. When they're not being used, they're to be put away. Or when they no longer have a use, they should be discarded. The same philosophy needs to take place in our foundation. When we find that something we had thought was right, and we come to the realization that it wasn't, it needs to be removed from our foundation. And the new thing that we learned needs to be put in its place because that's where it truly belongs. We all have our own great work. The great work. It means something different to every one of us, no matter what our paths are. But the greatest work you'll ever do, and you'll be continually doing it, is working on your foundation. Your foundation is the most important part of your spiritual path. And it doesn't matter what you practice, what your belief system is. Clear down to even Christianity, they talk about foundation. The house that was built on sand, or the house that was built on stone. But as we all know, well, for those that listen to me and have actually learned this concept and have added this part to their foundation, as we all know, there's truths in every path. There's truths in every religious path. It's being able to perceive those truths over the dogmatic things that are meant to control the masses, or the things that are meant to only the hierarchy of the groups know that everybody else under them is just a battery, an energy conduit for their disposal. So many people forget that we're all a shining star. And that is very true because we just don't represent this earthly image of ourselves. We represent also the cosmic image, the universe, the primordial. It's all a part of us. When we start denying these things, we start closing ourselves off to the point that we will eventually become an empty vessel for something to take over our vessel. This is why our foundation is so important. It protects us against possession. It protects us against misleading information that's meant to ensnare us and entrap us. We live in a day and age where masculinity and femininity is askew, where the importance of it has been eroded away, where people have created self illusions fake realities for themselves. By doing that, they don't realize the damage they're creating to their foundation. I'd like to think that all of us in this community understands the process and the importance of archetypes, personas, aspects, all those words mean the same thing. Because when we're doing certain work, sometimes we'll take on a different persona and work in that persona, but it's just a tool. When we are done, we come back down to our spiritual being, our foundation. Our foundation is also a tether. One part of the foundation resides here in this world, while the other part of the foundation resides in the outer world that's connected to the astral, ethereal, celestial, the hell, the universe. See, our foundations are also our receivers and transmitters. Because in the end, we're dealing with frequency and vibration. I don't know how, I see so many people that play with the numerology and think they understand it. And they're always misquoting it. Like right now, it's 1:45. So that's 10. Cannot be reduced any farther. It's the perfect time for spiritual operations because it's the perfect number. It's completion. Just like people focus on the number 13. Yes, 13 is an important number to us, but it's not 13. 13 is the vibration. 2 is the frequency. 2 is the number of 13. All numbers get reduced down. We find the number, like in our names, we find the number of the frequency or the vibration. Then we reduce it down to get to the single number. But so many have that wrong. They focus on the whole number. Just like 666 is 18, but it's actually 9. But they focus on one aspect of it. They don't realize that it needs to go down even farther. Just like the Masonic numbers 32 is nothing more than 5. 32 is important because that's the vibration. Just like people that get caught up in the letter G, how the G note, the importance of the G vibration. And we don't even realize it. And let's take this to a technology standpoint. We're right now in between getting ready to transfer from the 4G to the 5G. So we're dealing in, let's use this in the occult aspect, we're dealing with the number 5, the sphere that it represents, and the things that represent and make up 5. But we're also dealing with the vibration of G. So we're dealing with 5 in the vibration of G. We're changing the frequency of 5 by changing the vibration. And that's going to have a huge impact on everyone. I know people are feeling it now. The more and more 5G starts getting put up, the more we can feel it, the change. It's affecting our foundations. We need to counter that within our foundations. We need to start resonating a different frequency in our foundations to counter that 5G frequency. But you have to understand that once again, we're dealing with multiple aspects, multiple things. So, yes, we have to have an understanding of music, of vibrations and frequencies. All that has to be carefully and constantly attuned and changed in our foundation. Those, like I said, everything around us, everything we perceive, even the things we do not yet perceive, is part of our foundation. Our foundations are so important that we should, truthfully, when this is a fault on myself, I should be spending more than 1 month on my foundation. I should be spending every day checking my foundation and removing things that don't belong in my foundation because we're bombarded with so much every day. It is now worse than it's ever been. What makes it even worse, that is, people that don't have the knowledge that we have are using this and they don't even realize what they're using. And that makes a world, as we all know, a very dangerous place because we all know the lessons about what controlled thought versus uncontrolled thought can do. The uncontrolled thought is far more dangerous than the controlled thought. It is our actions and how we do things that make something good or bad. It has nothing to do with the energy we use because the truth is we're using all the energy. We just might be naming a few things, but we're working with every energy that's out there because it's a part of us. It's learning to accept that, putting that in our foundations when we do our great work, that we get the best results because everything's flowing naturally as it's supposed to. Nothing's being hindered by putting focus and emphasis over one energy over the other. We're not disrupting the energy. We're allowing it to flow naturally. Just like, you guys know there's the spiritual paradigms on this channel. I've done all of the paradigms of magic but one because no one's written about the one. But it's the day and age we're living in right now, and that is the, for better proper term, cyber magic. We're dealing in the cyber fear. And it is a form of cyber magic. The more we start building, adapting, using new technology that has all this knowledge that we possess built into it, clear down to the AI. All the AI is a temple, minus the vessel. And we all know what the vessel is. The vessel is our souls. Our bodies is the temple that house our soul, that house that energy. So when we start creating cybernetics and AIs. We're creating a temple that is void of a body, that has no foundation, has no foundation to ward and protect itself from the very thing that our foundations are meant to protect us from. And the fact that it is an empty vessel, it is there for anybody to jump in, or any entity to jump in. And that's a whole nother topic because that's the most dangerous of them all. We have things that's roaming this earth right now that's far ancient. That hasn't been seen roaming since ancient times. And they have perfect vessels created for them, which is why our foundations need to be strong. That we need to remove any fallacies, illusions that are in our foundations. Any chink in the armor needs to be removed. Because we've entered this time of age where we're interacting with who knows what. I don't think people realize how much of what our foundations are. I mean, I've covered just the basics of it. Because, like I said, those of us that understand what we learn, because most of us don't talk about the destruction of the temple process, because it is, in most sense, numbing. It's numbing because we're destroying all those false realities, those misconceptions. And when we are done, we're left with a bare foundation to rebuild on. We start rebuilding our temple foundation. And the only thing that should ever be put into that foundation is the truth, is the is those things that we know and perceive to be true. You know, which is hard for some of us, especially me. You know, yes, I became really more antisocial than I ever was after that because I understood how important it is to choose the people that you allow into your life, who you call friends or acquaintances, because those words have no meaning when it comes to our foundation. It has no meaning when it comes to spirit, when we're dealing with interacting with spirits or energy. Why? Because we're all made up of the same energy. That's why I tend to do things more organically than everybody else, because I understand the influence they have. This channel is a form of magic. My other channel is a form of magic. It is something that I've created. So therefore I have a responsibility to that creation, to what I allow into that creation, what I allow to become part of that creation's foundation. Just like we all have titles. Some of us have many titles. Do you know what? Up until a couple of weeks ago, none of those titles are part of my foundation. They only become an aspect of that foundation when it is needed. You know, because in the end, I may be the teacher today, but tomorrow I'll be the student. We're always learning. That's a good thing to have in your foundation. The realization that you're not always the teacher. You're not always whatever title you choose to be, because you're going to always be learning. So therefore, you will eventually be once more the student, to where you need to take everything you think you know and put it on the shelf while you're learning that. Then you bring everything back and you start going through that process of all the things you've learned, taking out the important things and putting it in the foundation and removing the things that no longer are part of it. You know, for me, I live very much like I've always thought. Action follows thought. But it goes farther than that. It's not even thought. It becomes a silent thought to where there's no thought or action. It happens. And a lot of times it's how my foundation is. When I realize something, it's already been changed in my foundation. Or when I realize what I've always known, just never vocalized. As the creator of this channel, this is my temple. Therefore, I am the temple master of this channel. But it goes much farther than that, because this channel reaches so many people. So many people will see that. Therefore, my temple is wherever I am at or I am perceived or heard. My temple is not just a temple. My temple encompasses everything around me, anything I interact with. So therefore, my foundations need to be firm. My spiritual path needs to be firm. But yet at the same time, when I sense something needs to be fixed, removed, and replaced, it becomes instant. So it doesn't affect the foundations that I encompass. That should be all of our mindset when it comes to our foundations. Our foundation is the most important work we'll ever do. And it's a work that never ends. It constantly needs maintenance. It constantly needs attention. Much like a good gardener that always is constantly watering the plants, tending to the plants, removing the weeds. Really? I see YouTube wants to screw with this channel today too. I mean, isn't anything sacred anymore? I can't answer your questions about your foundations because I don't know what you're ready to take in at this time. See, that's the thing. I can only point out what I see. See, Sometimes that's the other part of our problem. We forget that everybody's on their own path. We forget that everybody's learning at their own pace. Sometimes they're not ready to hear the things that we say. They haven't experienced that point to where they see it. They understand it. It's like, oh, I get it. He was right. Or she was right. Wow, how'd I miss that? Because you weren't ready for that change at that point in your path. Our jobs are simple: to point the things out, plant the seeds. When that time comes, you'll know it. Unless you do not have a good foundation. If your foundation is built upon lies, illusions, deceptions, half-truths, to where you started shutting things off, then you may never reach that point of change. Because you've shut yourself off to everything, including your own inner voice. That's why our foundations are so important. That's why it's so important to be careful what we allow into our lives, into our foundations. Because a crack in our foundation isn't a crack. It is very much like a huge hole. It might look like a crack. If you look at a crack under the most powerful microscope, it looks like a crater. Because, in a sense, that is what it is. It is a crater. Because we all know, we've seen when we use our spiritual sights or other spiritual awarenesses, we see things more clearly. We see things like we're looking through a neutron microscope. Everything is vivid. A crack is a crater. That's why we cannot have cracks in our foundation. That's why we have to be, I hate using this term, but it's the best term I can use, a very, very open mind. And that means understanding that there's truth in all things. That there is no set spiritual path. That our spiritual path will consist of multiple paths. There's no judging other people's paths and labeling them as bad or good. Because then we start getting caught up in that control mechanism. The very thing that's meant to keep us all divided, to keep us from being truly connected to one another. And that is what they don't want. They don't ever want us to realize our true potentials. They don't want us to see that we're all connected. No, they want to create as much division and as much barricades as possible. Because when we start realizing those things, we start seeing through the lies and deceptions. We start seeing things for what they are. This is why our foundations are so important. This is why our foundation has to be constantly under a microscope. It's taken me a long time in life to realize that. It's took some great people in my life to take their time and slowly point those things out. You know, my mentor and teacher. I know I'm probably his worst student that he's ever had because I am probably one of the most stubborn people and you'll ever meet on certain aspects. Or I'm also the very quiet one that just takes it all in and don't give feedback. Don't ask questions when, you know, you should. You're supposed to. Ask questions. Always. Question everything. The reason I didn't ask questions, which my teachers will hear this, he might chuckle, he might just say, oh, sorry, son of a bitch. I'm going to strangle him the next time I see him. I never asked questions because I got it. I understood it. I processed it that quick. And when I didn't understand something, I waited. I used patience and silence. I learned differently from so many other people, which makes the many teachers I have had in my life probably really hate the fact they ever had me as a student. But that's how my mind works. It wasn't that I didn't get it or didn't understand it, it was that I got it. And what I didn't understand, I worked it out. I don't do simplicity well. I do complexity. And I know I probably mentioned the old joke, but we were all locked in a room together and it was just as simple as, and there was a bomb in the room and it was just as simple as cutting the red wire, we'd all be dead. But if there was a bomb in the room and to disable it, all I had to do was put it together, we'd be out of there in minutes. But I've had some great people in my life, great mentors, great teachers. Once they understood me, you know, we're always learning, you know. Sometimes people come into our lives that's just for a short time to make us a better person, to help improve upon our foundations. Some of those connections are life lasting. The most important lesson I had to learn that took me forever, and this person out there knows who she is, was the fact that I quit listening to myself. I'd listen, but I wouldn't follow through. I wouldn't trust it. I'd always question it. I wouldn't lead by example on that aspect. I preached a good game on it, but I never led by example on that. And it took a situation to occur to where me and this person's no longer together to realize the last thing I needed to be taught on that aspect because I listened for once and it didn't quite have the ending that everything around us said it would because it was the most important lesson. Listen to myself. Listen. From that point, even after it went wrong, I kept listening. And I seen the fruits of the labor, the rewards. I hate using that term, but it was rewarding. It allowed me to see a lot of the things that I needed to remove from my foundation that was still there. The very things that was keep making me question that inner voice. And for that, I am thankful. And I am blessed. Just wish I would have learned that a long time ago when it was being taught to me the first time. But it wasn't one of those things at the time I was ready to learn. And by the time I was ready to learn it, I just wasn't listening to myself because I still had those things in my foundation. Our lives, our spiritual past is a never-ending journey. Even when we pass from this realm, this world, our spiritual path continues. One of the biggest things you'll need to learn about your foundation, everything you need to know is already inside you. It is those negative things in your foundation, those things that you let in your foundation that's hindering you from realizing your full potential, realizing who you really are. They are blocking you from your spiritual path. That's why it's so damn important to build our foundation around things that keep us open, only allowing the things that are truths and realizing that they might only be truths for that time, that they might eventually need to be removed because it was just for that time. I know a lot of people spend so much time on their oars that they just spend that a fraction of that time on their foundation. They would see a much more purer reaction or the purging of negativity from themselves. But did you purge that negativity from your foundation? Those negative influences that have attached themselves to your foundation. Much like saying your foundation was made of steel and that oxidation that's starting to rust that steel. You have to clean it, remove it, treat it, care for it. It's a constant maintenance because our auras are only as strong as our foundations. Our foundation has our cracks, so does our aura. Because all an aura is energy and vibration. It's the most easiest thing to penetrate. All I gotta do is mimic that frequency and vibration, and I'm not a threat. Then I'm just part of that frequency and vibration that you've created, and therefore I can get right to your foundation. Let out a lot of secrets today, didn't I? you know, and you guys can thank certain individuals that thought it was a good idea to attack me on my other channel. come at me with spiritual warfare on my other channel. I know who they are, and they know it. Like I said, wherever I go, whatever I create, I am the temple master of that. And I'm not going to let somebody attack my temple or those that are communing inside my temple. Should have left to those, you should have left well enough alone. But you didn't. So, if you didn't like what I was talking about before, you're really not going to want like what I start talking about now. All that concept of control you think you have over your followers. Oh no, I'm going to start teaching them the proper foundation. I'm going to destroy the illusions that you've placed on them, the deceptions, the manipulations. I'm going to allow them to choose a foundation that is theirs, that is strong, that will break that control. And I'm just not going to do it here on KOTR because I am everywhere. Most of you have only dealt with me with one foot in the shadows and one foot out. Remember that. You see, guys, that's the importance of a strong foundation. Seeing that for what it was when it happened, instantly knowing where it came from, and being able to use my foundation, the things that I've put it on to protect those who are in my chat room, those that were viewing it and watching it, those that didn't have that knowledge to protect themselves. Your foundation is the most important thing you'll ever work on in your spiritual path. It will also be the very thing that keeps you free from control, oppression, possession. So you need to be that constant gardener, that constant mechanic, or whatever label you want to use to tend to your foundation. Do not put your labels into your foundation. They only have a place in your foundation when it is being used. When it's not being used, it needs to be put away. So therefore, it is not part of your foundation. It is part of your tool chest, your utility belt, your dresser drawers, your altars, the drawers, something that you use and put away. When in use, it becomes an extension of your foundation. You need to start differentiating your tools as extensions that only have place and is only a part of your foundation when in use. When put away, they are no longer part of that foundation. They no longer have power or meaning on the foundation. With the internet, the cell phones, the iPads, they're tools. 4G, 5G, they're tools. They have no place, no power, unless I am using them as a tool, interacting with them, using them for scrying, or whatever term we want to call it nowadays. Even though I'm getting to the point where certain aspects of those are becoming part of my foundation, because it's the tool that needs to be used. But except I'm not completely blind to the aspect. It's not their tool. This tool's been around for generations, for centuries, throughout history. We put up 5G towers. Well, guess what? We had obelisks back in the day. In fact, the obelisks still stand. They were receivers and transmitters, made to receive and transmit, connected to ley lines. Not a new concept. I understand frequency and vibration. I understand the 5 paradigms of magic, because I work on the 5th. And one day I will write about it, or start talking about it more on podcasts. I'm still learning, still the student, so to speak. But I've learned enough to where I can also be the teacher. Everything's connected, guys. All of our spiritual past has truths in them. They all have their bad apples. Those that want to control, manipulate, keep giving it a bad name. Keep sowing the discords of fear to the masses. Because we all know, everybody fears the unknown. When there's no such thing as the unknown, it's already inside you. You just haven't opened the right door yet to learn it, to see it. That's all a teacher ever does. We don't teach you really anything. All we do is dangle the keys and find the right key to open that door with that knowledge that's already inside you. That's all our job is. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't want to make this a long video. Just let you guys know, periodically I'll be jumping over here, doing some more videos. To the new subscribers, welcome. I know there is one in particular. Probably a lot of the stuff you hear, like, watch and hear on here might not make sense at this time to you. This video is important because it's part of your foundation. Because right now I know you're going through the process of the destruction of it. Destroying the old foundation. Destroying the lies, misconceptions, half-truth, the things that you were programmed to believe. The things that you thought was reality, when in fact they're fake realities. And it's a process that takes time. I mean, it took me a year and a day to completely go through my destruction of the temple. But I remember the day, just like it was today. I remember the feeling, the things I heard, the things I seen, the things I felt. Once that is complete, that's when the true journey of our spiritual past began. Because that's when we start building a new foundation. We start building a foundation that is filled with truths, filled with the real reality that we're all connected. All the energies must flow freely. That we can't put emphasis over one energy over the other. They all must flow through it freely because we're part of all things. That is the first important step. That is one of the first things that needs to go into your base of your foundation. Then you need to find the thing that which will help you as a compass to be put into your foundation. And trust me, I say my base is druidic, but it's not entirely druidic anymore. Things have changed. As I've learned and grown, I've seen a different aspect of it. I've seen the things I wasn't ready to accept back then, and I've built upon it. There's even Christianity in my foundation, but there's so many others to the point I can't list them all anymore. But I've only taken those things that spoke to me, the things that my inner voice recognized. That's the importance of a solid foundation. So we're only taking in that is what is meant for us. We're stripping away the things that are meant to control us and separate us and divide us. We're stripping away the things that aren't spiritual and only allowing things that are spiritual in. You guys have a good day. I will see you on the next one. Don't know when it'll be, but you can probably rest assured from here on out, there'll probably be at least one video done a week on this channel. At least until October when I make my infamous disappearance like I always do for about a month. But I have a feeling this year it's not going to be a whole month with new realizations, a new understanding that I need to be just as focused on my foundation as I'm focused on everything else. Like I said, eventually gets to a point where it's happening without thought. But I thought I'd share this with you guys because it's important to understand that the greatest work we ever do is with our own temples, our own foundations. Yes, we'll do many great works, but the most important one is with the self and freeing the self and keeping it free. I will talk to you guys later.